Seattle was a city of motion. Its streets buzzed with the hum of coffee shops, the splash of rain against the pavement, and the distant rumble of ferries gliding through Puget Sound. To Harper Monroe it was more than a backdrop. It was the canvas of her life. She thrived on the city's energy, from the eclectic art galleries to the cozy corners of her favorite bookshops. But none of it held the warmth or vibrancy she felt when she was with Elena Vasquez. The two had been inseparable since their first day of college, a random seating arrangement in a freshman seminar transforming into a friendship that felt almost fated. Harper, with her untamed curls and an endless collection of graphic tees, was the kind of person who could talk to anyone, her laughter infectious and her enthusiasm boundless. Elena was her opposite in many ways, calm, meticulous, and guarded. Her dark eyes held secrets that invited curiosity, and her quiet confidence made people lean in to hear her speak. They balanced each other in a way that seemed effortless. Harper pushed Elena to let loose, to explore the world beyond her carefully drawn lines, while Elena grounded Harper, offering her the kind of unwavering support Harper hadn't realized she needed. Together they became fixtures in each other's lives, building a routine that revolved around shared meals, midnight study sessions, and hours spent at a tiny cafe tucked away in Capitol Hill. It was there, over steaming mugs of chai and the soft strains of indie music, that they shared their dreams and fears, solidifying a bond that felt unbreakable. For years, Harper had been content with their friendship. But as they transitioned from college roommates to young professionals navigating the chaos of adulthood, something began to shift. Harper found herself watching Elena more closely, noticing the way her lips quirked when she was lost in thought or how her laughter lit up a room. It wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, something that made Harper's heart race and her stomach twist with equal parts excitement and dread. She tried to ignore it. She told herself it was a phase, that her feelings would pass. But every time Elena brushed her hand against Harper's arm or leaned in to share a private joke, Harper felt a spark that refused to be extinguished. She replayed their moments together in her mind, searching for signs that Elena might feel the same way. But Elena's words, her casual mentions of awkward dates and her joking declarations that love was a myth, kept Harper firmly rooted in reality. Elena didn't see her that way. She couldn't. The weight of her unspoken feelings grew heavier with each passing day. Harper became hyper-aware of every interaction, second-guessing her words and actions in a way she never had before. She hated the distance she was creating between them, but she didn't know how to stop. Every time she considered confessing, a voice in her head warned her of the risks. Elena was her best friend. What if telling her the truth destroyed that? It was a quiet Thursday night when the walls Harper had built around her heart began to crack. The rain drummed steadily against Elena's apartment windows, the city outside muted by the storm. Inside, the two of them lounged on Elena's plush gray couch, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table and a ridiculous comedy special playing on the TV. Elena was curled up at one end, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, her face flushed from laughter. Harper sat at the other, her legs tucked beneath her, stealing glances at Elena when she thought she wouldn't notice. "I can't believe you think that guy's funny," Harper teased, taking another sip of wine. "His jokes are so obvious." "That's the point," Elena countered, grinning. "Sometimes you don't need to overthink humor. You just let it happen." Harper raised an eyebrow. This from the woman who critiques every movie we watch like she's writing for the New York Times? Elena laughed, her eyes sparkling. Touché. The warmth between them felt easy, familiar, and for a moment Harper let herself forget the turmoil inside her. But then, as the laughter faded and the conversation lulled, Elena asked a question that shattered the fragile balance Harper had been clinging to. "Have you ever been in love with someone who didn't know it?" The question hung in the air, charged with unspoken meaning. Harper froze, her mind racing. Her first instinct was to laugh it off, to deflect with humor as she always did. But when she glanced at Elena, she saw genuine curiosity in her eyes. Harper's throat tightened, her pulse quickening as she struggled to find an answer that wouldn't betray her secret. Harper began, but the words caught in her throat. She forced a laugh, shaking her head as she reached for her wine glass. "What kind of question is that?" Elena shrugged, her gaze thoughtful. "Just something I've been thinking about. People keep so much to themselves, you know? It's kind of sad." Harper nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Yeah. I guess it is. She turned her attention back to the TV, desperate to change the subject. But the moment had already passed, leaving behind a tension that neither of them acknowledged. Harper felt her walls rebuilding themselves, brick by brick, as she vowed to keep her feelings hidden for as long as it took. But deep down she knew the truth couldn't stay buried forever. The weeks following Elena's innocent question were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions for Harper. She had hoped the moment would fade into memory, a forgotten snippet of conversation drowned out by the countless others they shared. But the tension it left behind was palpable, like a thread pulled taut between them, invisible but unyielding. Harper couldn't tell if Elena felt it too or if she was oblivious to the turmoil brewing beneath Harper's carefully maintained facade. Elena, meanwhile, seemed more present than ever. She texted Harper almost daily with suggestions for weekend outings, concerts, hikes, new coffee shops to explore. She confided more about her frustrations with law school, her hopes for the future, and her disillusionment with her string of failed dates. Every time she spoke about her search for someone who truly understands me, someone I can be completely honest with, Harper's chest tightened, her heart aching with the weight of the words she couldn't say. Harper did her best to distance herself without being obvious. She started making excuses, late nights at work, fictional deadlines, but Elena's persistence made avoidance nearly impossible. Every time Harper tried to retreat, Elena pulled her back with an invitation or a vulnerable admission that Harper couldn't refuse. The proximity was intoxicating and unbearable all at once, leaving Harper feeling like she was trapped in a loop with no escape. The breaking point came at a party. A mutual friend, Claire, had invited them both to her apartment for a laid-back gathering. Harper had hesitated, unsure if she could handle spending the evening in Elena's orbit, but she didn't want to arouse suspicion. Elena, predictably, had been the one to convince her. "It'll be fun," Elena had said, flashing that irresistible smile. "We'll stay for a little while and then I'll make an excuse so we can leave early. Deal?" Harper had reluctantly agreed, not realizing how much she would come to regret it. The apartment buzzed with music and chatter, the air thick with the mingling scents of beer and perfume. Harper felt out of place, her usual easygoing demeanor buried under the weight of her secret. She stuck close to the kitchen, nursing a drink and making polite small talk with strangers, all the while hyper-aware of Elena's presence across the room. Elena was laughing with a group of friends, her dark hair falling effortlessly over her shoulders, her smile bright enough to make Harper's heart ache. It was too much. Harper slipped out onto the balcony, the cool night air a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. She leaned against the railing, closing her eyes and taking deep breaths in an attempt to calm the storm inside her. The city stretched out below, a sea of glittering lights and distant sounds, but even the beauty of the view couldn't quiet the thoughts swirling in her mind. The sound of the sliding glass door opening behind her pulled her from her reverie. She glanced over her shoulder and saw Claire stepping onto the balcony, a bottle of beer in hand and a concerned expression on her face. "You okay?" Claire asked, leaning against the railing beside her. Harper forced a smile. "Yeah, just needed some air. Parties aren't really my thing." Claire chuckled. "Could have fooled me. You usually seem like the life of the party." "Not tonight," Harper admitted, her voice softer now. Claire studied her for a moment before taking a sip of her beer. "This isn't about the party, is it?" Harper hesitated, her grip tightening on the railing. She hadn't intended to confide in anyone, but the words spilled out before she could stop them. "I'm in love with someone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And it's killing me because I know it's never going to happen." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Does this someone have a name?" Harper hesitated again, but the weight of her feelings demanded release. "Elena," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I'm in love with Elena. And I can't stop thinking about her." The silence that followed was deafening. Harper turned to Claire, expecting a response, but the look on Claire's face wasn't reassuring. Her eyes widened slightly and she gestured behind Harper with a subtle nod. Harper froze, her heart dropping into her stomach. Slowly she turned around. Elena was standing in the doorway, her hand still on the glass door, her expression a mixture of shock and confusion. She looked like she'd just walked into the middle of a scene she wasn't supposed to see. Claire, realizing the gravity of the moment, slipped back inside without a word, leaving Harper and Elena alone on the balcony. "Elena," Harper started, panic rising in her chest. This isn't what it sounds like." Elena stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate. Then what is it, Harper? She asked, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief. Because it sounded like you just said you're in love with me. Harper's pulse pounded in her ears, her mouth suddenly dry. She wanted to deny it, to brush it off as a misunderstanding, but the look in Elena's eyes demanded honesty. Harper swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she spoke. Yes, she admitted, her gaze dropping to the ground. I have been for a long time. But I didn't want you to know. I didn't want this to change anything between us. Elena stared at her, her expression unreadable. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours, the weight of the moment pressing down on both of them. Why didn't you tell me? Elena asked finally, her voice softer now. Because I was scared, Harper said, looking up to meet her eyes. Scared of losing you. Scared that you'd never look at me the same way again. I didn't want to ruin what we have. Elena took another step closer, the distance between them shrinking. And you think keeping this from me would have been better? I didn't know what else to do, Harper said, her voice breaking. I never wanted you to hear it like this. Elena didn't respond immediately. She seemed lost in thought, her gaze searching Harper's face for answers. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. I need time, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say right now. I just need time. Harper nodded, tears stinging her eyes. Take all the time you need, she whispered. Just, please don't hate me. Elena didn't answer. She turned and walked back inside, leaving Harper alone on the balcony, the weight of her confession settling over her like a storm. The days following Harper's confession were some of the longest and loneliest of her life. Elena's words, I need time, echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. Time for what? To decide if she could still be friends with Harper? To sort out feelings Harper was terrified she didn't share? Each unanswered text, every moment of silence between them, felt like another piece of their friendship slipping away. Harper tried to focus on work, throwing herself into a new design project for a local nonprofit, but her heart wasn't in it. Every time her phone buzzed, her breath hitched with a fleeting hope that it was Elena, only to be crushed when it was someone else. At night, Harper replayed the balcony moment over and over in her head, dissecting every word, every look. Had there been something in Elena's expression beyond shock? Had she seen a flicker of something softer, something hopeful? Or was Harper deluding herself? Sitting on her apartment floor one evening, surrounded by a mess of sketches and coffee-stained notebooks, Harper clutched her phone like it was a lifeline. Her thumb hovered over Elena's name in her contacts. She had typed and deleted at least a dozen messages already. Elena, please let me explain more. Delete. Can we talk? I miss you. Delete. I'm sorry for putting this on you. Take your time, but I'm here when you're ready. Delete. Harper set the phone down with a frustrated sigh, burying her face in her hands. She was stuck in limbo, teetering between hope and despair, and it was slowly tearing her apart. Meanwhile, Elena was no less tormented. She had retreated into herself after that night, avoiding Harper's messages not out of malice, but because she didn't trust herself to respond. Her emotions were a tangled mess, guilt, fear, and confusion warring with something else, something she couldn't quite name. At first, she tried to focus on her studies, burying herself in case briefs and mock trial prep. But Harper's words kept intruding on her thoughts, breaking her concentration at the worst moments. I'm in love with Elena. The sentence echoed in her mind, unraveling everything she thought she knew about their friendship. Late one night, Elena sat on her couch, staring at an untouched glass of wine on the coffee table. The apartment felt too quiet, too still without Harper's laughter filling the space. She had always taken comfort in Harper's presence, in her ability to make even the darkest days feel lighter. Now that absence was a gaping hole in her life. Elena pulled her knees to her chest, her mind drifting to the countless moments they had shared over the years. Harper's bright smile when she walked into a room, the way her voice softened when she talked about her passions, the little gestures of care, bringing coffee to Elena during late-night study sessions, checking in after a particularly tough exam. Had she taken all of that for granted? She thought about her own string of failed dates, the way she always found a reason to end things before they got too serious. She had blamed it on her busy schedule, on her demanding aspirations, but was that the real reason? Or had she been looking for something she already had, something she hadn't been willing to see until now? Her mind flashed to Harper's laugh, the way it lit up her eyes, and for the first time, Elena allowed herself to wonder. What if? What if her reluctance to commit wasn't fear of being hurt, but fear of acknowledging how deeply Harper had already woven herself into her heart? What if Harper's confession wasn't the end of their story, but the beginning of something she hadn't dared to dream about? By the end of the week, Elena couldn't ignore the growing pull toward Harper any longer. She missed her. Missed their conversations, their shared jokes, the way Harper always knew exactly what to say to make her feel seen. But this wasn't just about missing her friend. It was about the way Elena's heart ached when she thought of Harper's confession, the way her chest tightened at the thought of losing her forever. Elena sat at her desk, staring at her phone with the same trepidation Harper had felt days earlier. She opened their last text thread and hesitated for a long moment before typing. "Can we meet? There's something I need to say." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, her stomach twisting with nerves. When Harper's reply came minutes later, the simple yes, anytime, brought a small, tentative smile to Elena's lips. The park they chose to meet at had always been a favorite spot for both of them, a quiet oasis in the heart of the city. Harper arrived early, pacing near the duck pond as she tried to calm the racing of her heart. She hadn't slept well in days, her anxiety gnawing at her, but the thought of finally seeing Elena again was enough to keep her upright. When Elena arrived, her presence hit Harper like a gust of wind. She looked as composed as ever in a navy coat, her hair loose around her shoulders, but there was something different in her expression. A softness, a vulnerability Harper hadn't seen before. "Hi," Elena said, her voice tentative. "Hi," Harper replied, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment neither of them spoke, the tension between them thick enough to cut. Then Elena gestured toward a bench. "Can we sit?" Harper nodded, following her silently. Once they were seated, Elena turned to Harper, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began. "About us?" Harper's breath caught. "Elena, No," Elena interrupted gently, holding up a hand. "Let me say this. Please." Harper nodded, her chest tight with anticipation. "I've spent the last few days replaying everything in my head," Elena continued. "All the moments we've shared, all the times I felt something but pushed it aside because I didn't know what it meant. And now I think I do." Harper's heart pounded, her hope warring with her fear. "Elena, you don't have to say anything you're not ready for. I just want you to be happy." Elena reached out then, taking Harper's hand in hers. The touch was warm, grounding. "You make me happy," she said softly. "I don't know what this means yet or where it will lead, but I do know one thing: I want to find out. With you." Tears welled in Harper's eyes, her chest swelling with a mix of relief and joy. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elena smiled, her grip on Harper's hand tightening. "I've never been more sure of anything." The park seemed to fade around them, the noise of the city distant and unimportant. In that moment, there was only them, and for the first time in weeks, Harper allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something more. The park was as they had always loved it. Serene, nestled in a quiet corner of the city where the rush of traffic faded into the gentle hum of nature. The tall trees swayed in the breeze, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into soft, dappled patterns on the winding path. Harper walked beside Elena, the tension between them an invisible current neither could escape. The path was familiar, but today, every step felt weighted, each moment pregnant with unspoken words. They had chosen this park deliberately, though neither of them had said it out loud. It was their place, a sanctuary they had shared through years of friendship. It had been the site of countless picnics, deep conversations, and quiet moments of companionship. But today it felt different, charged with the knowledge that something between them had shifted irrevocably. Harper kept her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat, her heart pounding as she stole glances at Elena. Elena's face was calm, her expression thoughtful, as if she were sorting through the words she wanted to say. Harper didn't push. She didn't trust herself to speak yet, afraid that anything she said might break the fragile peace between them. Finally, as they reached a small clearing by the pond, Elena stopped. She turned to face Harper, her dark eyes serious but soft. Harper's breath hitched, the weight of the moment settling over her like a heavy blanket. "I've been thinking," Elena began, her voice quiet but steady. "A lot, actually. About us. About everything." Harper froze, her chest tightening. This was it. the conversation she had both dreaded and longed for. She braced herself, unsure whether Elena's next words would bring relief or heartbreak. "I never thought about us in a romantic way before," Elena continued, her gaze steady on Harper's. "I didn't allow myself to. You've always been my best friend, my anchor, and I guess I just compartmentalized. I thought if I opened that door I'd ruin everything we have." Harper swallowed hard, her hands clenching inside her pockets. "Elena, you don't have to." "Let me finish," Elena interrupted gently, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "The truth is, since that night I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. About you. About us. And it's made me realize something." Harper's chest ached with anticipation, the world around them narrowing until there was only Elena, her voice the only thing Harper could hear. "I don't know what this means yet," Elena admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I do know that I care about you. More than I thought I did. More than I ever let myself admit." Harper blinked, her throat tight with emotion. "Elena, No, listen," Elena said, stepping closer. "I don't want you to think I'm saying this because I feel like I have to. I'm saying it because I want to. Because I've spent the last week realizing that maybe I've been blind to what's been right in front of me all this time. And I don't want to run from it anymore." The words hit Harper like a wave, crashing over her with a mix of relief, disbelief, and hope. She searched Elena's face, looking for any sign of hesitation or doubt, but all she saw was sincerity. Raw, unfiltered sincerity. "Elena," Harper said, her voice trembling, "I never wanted to put you in this position. I never wanted to make things complicated for you. She paused, struggling to find the right words. "I just want you to be happy." Elena reached out then, her hand brushing Harper's arm before curling around her wrist. The touch was grounding, steadying. "You make me happy," she said softly. "You always have. And I think I want to figure out what that means." Harper's breath caught, tears welling in her eyes. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured or—" "I'm sure," Elena said firmly, her gaze unwavering. "I don't know where this will lead, but I know I want to find out. With you." The words hung in the air, a quiet declaration that felt both monumental and intimate. Harper felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she didn't brush it away. Instead, she let out a soft, breathless laugh, the tension that had gripped her chest for weeks finally easing. "God, I've wanted to hear you say that for so long," Harper admitted, her voice breaking with emotion. Elena smiled, a warmth spreading across her face that Harper hadn't seen before, a mixture of relief and something deeper. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "But I'm here now. And I want to try." Harper nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of hope and gratitude. "Then let's try." For a moment they simply stood there, the world around them quiet except for the rustle of leaves in the breeze. And then, without hesitation, Elena leaned forward, wrapping her arms around Harper in a hug that felt like coming home. Harper closed her eyes, her own arms encircling Elena as she let herself savor the moment. The warmth, the connection, the quiet promise that they were about to step into something new together. As they pulled back, their faces just inches apart, Elena's smile grew softer. "This is going to be different," she said, her voice light but sincere. "But I think it'll be good." Harper grinned, her heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. Different can be good. And as they began walking again side by side, their steps in sync, Harper realized that for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel so uncertain. It felt full of possibility. The rain drummed against the windows of Harper's apartment, a relentless rhythm that seemed to echo the nervous energy building inside. The storm had rolled in hours earlier, trapping Harper and Elena indoors with no plans but to wait it out. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows across the room, the power having succumbed to the weather, and the sound of the storm created a cocoon of intimacy that neither of them could ignore. They were seated on the floor, a half-empty bottle of wine and scattered Polaroids from their college days spread between them. Harper leaned against the couch, her knees drawn up as she held one of the pictures. A blurry shot of the two of them laughing uncontrollably at a party, their arms slung around each other. Elena was lying on her stomach, her chin resting in her palm as she studied another photo. The atmosphere was warm, nostalgic, but the tension beneath the surface was impossible to ignore. "This one's my favorite," Elena said, holding up a photo of Harper with a paintbrush in her hand, her face smeared with streaks of blue and green. You were so proud of that mural you painted for the art department. Harper smiled softly, her gaze lingering on Elena's face. That was a good day. You brought me coffee while I was working on it. I think that was the first time I realized how much you cared. Elena glanced up, her dark eyes catching Harper's. Of course I cared. I always have. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Harper's heart thudded in her chest, but she didn't respond, unsure of where the moment was headed. She set the photo down, her fingers brushing against Elena's as they both reached for the same one. The touch was brief, but it sent a spark up Harper's arm, leaving her breathless. Harper, Elena began, her voice quieter now. Can I ask you something? Anything, Harper replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands before she met Harper's eyes again. Have you ever been scared of losing something so much that you didn't realize you were already holding on to it? The question caught Harper off guard. Her breath hitched, and for a moment she wasn't sure how to respond. I think I know what you mean, she said carefully. But what are you afraid of losing? Elena sat up, crossing her legs as she faced Harper fully. The candlelight illuminated her face, highlighting the vulnerability in her expression. She admitted. I was afraid of losing you. And I think that's why I've kept myself at a distance for so long. Harper's throat tightened, tears pricking at her eyes. You were never going to lose me, Elena. I've always been here. I know, Elena said, her voice breaking. But I was so scared of ruining what we had. And then, when you told me how you felt, I realized, what scared me even more was the idea that I might have waited too long to see what was right in front of me. The words hit Harper like a wave, crashing over her with a mix of relief, hope, and a touch of disbelief. You mean that? She asked, her voice trembling. Elena nodded, her gaze steady despite the emotion in her eyes. I do. And I don't want to waste any more time being scared. The silence that followed was charged, the storm outside a distant roar compared to the thunder in Harper's chest. Elena reached out then, her hand brushing against Harper's before she intertwined their fingers. The touch was soft, tentative, but it sent a jolt through Harper that left her breathless. I don't know where this will go, Elena continued, her voice steady but full of emotion. But I want to find out. With you. Harper felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she didn't bother to brush it away. I've wanted to hear you say that for so long, she admitted, her voice cracking with emotion. Elena gave her a small, shaky smile, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm sorry it took me so long. Before Harper could respond, Elena leaned in, her movements slow, deliberate, giving Harper every chance to pull away. But Harper didn't move. She closed the distance between them, her heart pounding as their lips met in a kiss that felt like it had been years in the making. The kiss was a revelation, a mix of passion and relief, of unspoken feelings finally given a voice. Harper felt Elena's hands move to her face, her touch warm and steady, grounding her in the moment. Harper's own hands found Elena's waist, pulling her closer as if she were afraid to let her go. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, their foreheads resting against each other as they shared a quiet moment of connection. Harper's heart felt like it might burst, the weight of weeks, years, of unspoken emotions finally lifted. I guess we're really doing this, Harper said, a soft laugh escaping her lips. Elena smiled, her hands still cupping Harper's face. Yeah, she said. We are. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside Harper felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, but for the first time she wasn't afraid. She and Elena would face whatever came next together, their friendship now the foundation of something even deeper. The transition from friends to lovers wasn't going to be easy, Harper knew that. But as she looked into Elena's eyes, she saw a future worth fighting for, a connection stronger than any storm. And for the first time she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something extraordinary.